Hope other people come, but meanwhile, we're going to start right now. This evening's program is dedicated to progress in cancer. Unfortunately, all of us experienced it in family members and in relatives and friends. And things have changed so much since the last 45 years that I've known Dr. Kaplan. Back then we had treatments for some lymphomas and some leukemias, practically nothing for anything else. Right now, yesterday I saw a patient of mine that Dr. Kaplan knows and is treating, who has pancreatic cancer, who was diagnosed a year and 3 quarters ago. In the past, she would have been long gone by now. She's thriving, she looks terrific, and her last CAT scan she told me looked terrific.
Well, what kind of cancer?
Pancreatic. That's an example.
I heard it's a bad cancer.
Yes.
We'll talk about it.
We'll talk about it. So, things have changed. They're changing every single day, and with the discoveries of the human genome, we will be able to target things much better than ever. So, Dr. Kaplan is the Director of Clinical Oncology at New York Hospital, Queens. At one time, he was the Director of the Division of Oncology at Einstein. That's where I met him when we were both young. We still are at heart. He runs something called Queens Medical Associates, which is an oncology group on Union Turnpike and Utopia Parkway. And with a series with 6 oncologists, a pain management person. If you want to know anything about this dreaded disease, here's the man for you.
There's a cure for lung cancer?
We'll
He's going to talk
talk.
about it.
First of all,
Listen,
My
don't talk.
husband died from lung cancer.
That's awful. Listen.
I'm here in Queens because of my good friend Mel Bright, who told me he needed help when I sort of started to move out of Einstein, 1982. So I've been a doctor here in Queens since 1982, but I know Queens a lot longer than that. I was, my aunt lived in Kew Garden Hills, was a teacher there, taught these 2 guys that she didn't think would amount to anything. Simon and Garfunkel. I played touch football with Garfunkel, but all they would do was pluck at their strings all day, not pay any attention in class. So she didn't think they were very much of them. So I go back a long way in this area, and we lived in Casino Boulevard for a long time with my parents when they moved out of Brooklyn. I'm going to start with urban legends. My children taught me about urban legends. Those are things that everybody believes are true and are not. I'm going to start about a whole bunch of stuff about cancer urban legends. Starting with the first one. Everybody knows that cancer is more common now than ever, and that the big problem, I'm sorry, I'm walking away from the screen, and that the big, I won't do that again, and the big problem with the cancers, and the reason cancer is so much more common, is because our environment is worse and worse and worse. All wrong. If you correct for the age of the population, the incidence of cancer is going down. Our environment is better than it's ever been. I used to work at Einstein, so I would pass Co-op City every day coming into work, and I could never see the top of Co-op City because of the smog, except that there's no smog there now. It's perfectly clear. And the same thing is true for food, for a lot of environmental things. So in fact, the incidence of cancer, when you correct for the age of the population, because it's a disease of the elderly, is much improved compared to where it was even a few years ago. And I'll show you some data that bears on that. And the next slide. Oh, so we'll go back to that one. We'll go through some of the other urban legends first. Early detection is the key to cancer cures, especially with mammograms and PSAs. We'll come back to that because it ain't true either. Early detection is part of the story, and certainly there are needs for mammograms and for PSAs, but much more limited than we used to. It's the biology of the cancer that determines whether it's a good cancer or a bad cancer, whether somebody lives or dies from that cancer, not so much the early detection, although early detection is useful in certain cases. It's infectious and hereditary, both true and not true. It's not infectious, but there are viruses that are associated with cancer. We know that HPV virus You never see a nun with cervical cancer because they can't get the virus that causes cervical cancer, so they don't get cervical cancer. Very uncommon in Jews as well, because you need to have a large number of sexual partners, not common in the Jewish community. So cervical cancer is a virus-related disease, and there are a number of them. The people with AIDS let through a whole number of viruses. And it's not because the viruses cause cancer directly, it's they set the stage so cancers can occur. Most cancers are not inherited. You're not going to pass it on. Nobody's going to catch it from some parent that had it, except for the chosen people. The Ashkenazi Jewish people have a 1% incidence of a gene that's very closely associated with breast cancer and ovarian cancer. And that you can pass on. And we'll come back and talk about that in a little bit if we have time. Breast cancer is a death sentence, right? You get breast cancer, you're terrible. It's all over. Well, it turns out that there are about over 200,000 women every year with breast cancer. There are 40,000 deaths, but it means 80% of women with breast cancer walk away. And it's not an immediate death. My favorite story on that one was a woman who came to me. She had metastatic breast cancer that spread from her breast. She broke a bone. They analyzed the break, and it had cancer in it. So she had metastatic breast cancer. And she came to me with her bags packed, not to Margaret Teeth, but she was going to go to Calvary for her terminal care. And she died 27 years later. It was interesting that she was the assistant to the Monsignor at St. Patrick's, because after I took care of her, I had all of these large number of Catholic people coming to see me to be taken care of, because she did not die for 27 years. So a cancer diagnosis, even a metastatic cancer diagnosis, is not an immediate death sentence. It may take many years before, and people can live with cancer for a very long time. And that's the metastatic breast cancer, kills quickly. The cure of breast cancer is being held back by the government and pharmaceutical companies. I worked in cancer research. I work around cancer researchers all the time. A more dedicated group of people you will never meet, and they're all competitive, competing with each other to get even the smallest advance in the treatment of breast cancer. Nobody's holding back anything. I wish we had the answer to cancer. It's not so simple, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. And the magic bullet to cure cancer is just around the corner. Here's the problem with that one. Every cancer is different, even within cancers that sound the same, like your husband died of lung cancer. Well, we used to think of lung cancer as a couple of kinds. Now we know there are 10 different kinds of lung cancer, and there are going to be many more as we learn more and more about lung cancer. Well, the one thing that we know in the environment that causes cancer, and that nobody should be doing, and no children should be doing, and no relatives should be doing, is smoking. That's the only thing we know, among other things. Asbestos is a problem, but not the general environmental
They
agents.
work with asbestos there.
Well, that is a cause of lung cancer. Okay, next slide. Just to make a point, New York is one of the highest cancer incidents in the country, 108,000 patients a year with lung cancer in this state. Texas, which is a bigger state, although about the same population, 112,000. California leads the list with 171,000 patients. And Florida is a close second, 118,000. Those are the big cancer centers. So we have a ton of people in this state every year who get cancer. Next slide. But this is the latest data from the American Cancer Society in terms of the incidence of cancer. This is the death rate from cancer by males. Look what happened to lung cancer. It's coming down. Look what happened to prostate cancer. It's coming down. Colorectal cancer. It's coming down. By the way, talking about inherited cancers, colon cancer, also the chosen people. 6% of Ashkenazi men will get colon cancer. So we have to have our...
Not women?
Not so many women, more men. And so most of the cancers are in fact on the downward slope. The most common cause of death remains lung. Prostate is not a common cause of death. It's the most common cancer. Next slide. And in women took up smoking in the 70s. So guess what? They got lung cancer. And it is now the leading cause of death from cancer in women. It used to be breast, no longer breast. And look what's happening to the death rate from breast cancer. It's coming down. Okay, so when people say we've made no progress against cancer, they're just not looking. Even colorectal for women has come down. So cancer